Good afternoon. My name is Sylvia Schwag-Serger. I'm the CEO of the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences, and I am so happy to welcome all of you to the seminar that we have been looking forward to for, well, 3 months maybe, but for quite a while. We're really happy that you can all join us. We also have close to 500 people that have registered to watch the seminar online, and there has been a long waiting list to participate in person. So we're thrilled because it means that there is an interest, hopefully, in this work that we have commissioned. And just to give you a short introduction, it's almost exactly a year ago that Mario Draghi presented his report on the state of European competitiveness. Sweden is one of the countries that traditionally ranks at the top of a lot of innovation rankings in Europe, but sometimes also internationally, like with the Global Innovation Index. But I think as we're all starting to understand for every day that goes by, this world is moving extremely quickly, not least when it comes to technology. And it's not enough to just be content that we are innovation leaders in Europe and to some extent internationally. We need to constantly understand where we are and figure out where we want to be headed and what we need to do in order to go where we want to go. And so that's why we commissioned this report, because we think that it's extremely important for us, if we have an ambition to want to be technology leaders in the future, to really understand on a more granular level where we are, and not just by looking at publications or patents, but a combination and also including investments. It was a coincidence, but I'm very happy about this coincidence. It just happens to be so that I actually know the people who helped Mario Draghi produce the analysis in the Draghi report quite well, Pierre-Alex and Andrea, who have both been extremely important in European policy analysis and also in this data-driven approach to understanding where we stand technologically. So I am so happy that you agreed to do this. To my knowledge, we are the first EU member state to commission such an analysis. And I am also grateful that you let us ruin your summer to do this, because we find that this is quite urgent to understand this. We can't spend, years or months. So you didn't have a lot of time. And we also wanted something that's quite up to date. So we are just very happy to welcome you all to the seminar, also the people who are joining us online. We view this as the beginning of a process. This process is also what Eva has launched, this initiative called Swedish Futures, is part of this process where we're hoping that Sweden can sort of collectively try to figure out where we stand in terms of technology and innovation, and as I said, where we would like to be headed and what needs to happen for that. I also just want to mention that we've had very good dialogue with both Vinnova and the Swedish Research Council. As you from the Swedish audience may know, both Vinnova and the Swedish Research Council have been tasked by the government to look into and invest into excellent technology clusters. So of course this work is hoping and will be closely linked to what Vinnova and VR and the Swedish Research Council are doing, because again, it's all about gathering the troops and trying to do things together to create a mobilization effort for Sweden going forward, but also, and this is on a personal note, also not just for Sweden, but for Europe, because I think it's extremely important that Europe as a continent is part of this geopolitical race for the mastery of core technologies. With that, I'm very pleased to welcome Joachim Appelqvist, who is my deputy, and he also has the nice title at this academy. His name is Secretary to the Academy. I'm just the CEO. So with that, I look forward to you guiding us through these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. And thank you for that comprehensive introduction to the work that we're commissioned and also the work that we will do with the Swedish Futures. So I would like to invite the main speakers of tonight and the authors of the report, Swedish Competitiveness and Investment Priorities, to the stage. Please welcome Andrea Renda, Director of Research at Center for European Policy Studies, and Pierre-Alexandre Ballon, Chief Data Scientist. Please, the floor is yours. And here is the clicker.
Thank you very much, Joachim. Thank you, Sylvia. thanks to Eva for inviting us and organizing this fantastic event. We are so happy and honored to be here and to share the results of this study. You will see our summer, the result of the summer that we spent crunching data. I will share this, and most of the results and the data-driven analysis will be shown by Pierre-Alexandre, who is the chief data scientist of CEPS. I'm the director of research at CEPS. CEPS is the largest independent think tank in Brussels, and we are, since a couple of years, in particular with Pierre-Alexandre, really invested in this big task of bringing data-driven analysis and coupling that with sense-making and policy analysis to the Brussels policymakers and to the rest of Europe and beyond. And so this is something that made us particularly happy that we could start with a country like Sweden that in principle is nothing and one could say, you know, could criticize for or could observe about, because it's typically considered the top innovator in Europe, or at least by some indicators, the #1 country in Europe. It's probably good to start from there because, and that's a question that I ask everyone, do we really know today what does it mean to be competitive with everything that is happening around us and the disruptions that change paradigm at every single moment? Can we be content, as Sylvia was saying, by being first in a ranking that really brings together data from the past few years? Or are we facing a cliff, or are we facing a paradigm shift? And are we equipped for it? So what we will show you is what the data say, but also we will try to do some sense-making, some discussion on what the data show and how do you put it into context. So we are basically the only 2 non-Swedes in the room, so it's a bit pretentious, I think, to come and tell you something about your country. So you should take it with a pinch of salt. And but this is the result of objective analysis, and then of course it depends on the data that we put together. And there might be data that is not there, and you will certainly find something that can be done to improve this research. So we come here humbly to show what the data say. But sometimes I think it's good not to be from the country, right? I remember people saying, how do I see Paris from above? I want to see the view of Paris. And people always say, you should go on top of the Tour Eiffel. But the problem of being on top of the Eiffel Tower is there is only one problem for me, apart from the fact that it can get windy, is that you don't get to see the Eiffel Tower, right? So if you go to the Tour de Montparnasse, you get the full view of Paris with the Eiffel Tower in it. And that's good, because then you get a more detached view, more distant view, and you get the whole picture. So maybe this is what we try to do with you in this few minutes in which we share the results of this study. I think most of you have had a copy. So Sweden, as I said, a favorable but fragile outlook, not necessarily only because of Sweden, but because the world is fragile. Leading in intensity in research and development, typically also having something that most European countries don't have, which is a fairly good business research and development expenditure. And by most of the rankings, again, ranking very high, but also in terms of economic performance more generally, a country that has had a moment of sluggish growth, but started to pick up again. Also, the projections for 2026 are quite good. But again, with all the uncertainty that surrounds us, right? These are projections that will have to be reviewed and updated every half hour to some extent, or every tweet or truth, right? Truth, of course, is not the real thing. So the fundamentals are great in the sense of, when I come from a country that is 100% debt GDP ratio more than Sweden. So I mean, the fact that this gives the possibility to have fiscal policy space in Sweden, resilient revenues, but also a very open trade, and so high exposure to global shocks. So this has to be factored into the picture. But there's also new constraints and new opportunities, as you will see, that emerge that are not something that you can see from projecting the past into the present and future. For example, the emphasis on defense, as I will say at the end of this presentation, also the fact that at the pan-European level, there's much more space today to consider investments in dual use. That is something that has not been possible to the same scale, fortunately for what we've been through, and unfortunately for what we face now, right, until now. So great infrastructure, strong talent, although in some cases facing shortages according to the analysis. And for me, very important as someone who's been studying countries in Europe and in other parts of the world for my whole career, academic and professional, a very unique and peculiar approach to capitalism that is the type of capitalism that we need today. So a capitalism that privileges the long term. And I've been studying, for example, how in Sweden governments have also looked at the 4 capitals on how to preserve in intergenerational altruism, let's say, terms, the capital that we leave to the ones that will come after us. So very different from the types of dynamics that we see in other parts of the world. And so this has to be also considered when we look at the data. All in all, what we see, as I said already, and Sylvia said, having a nice track record doesn't mean being prepared for the future. And so we hope that the data that we will show in the coming minutes will also trigger a debate to be a good conversation starter, but at the same time can be coupled with continuous analysis and even foresight to look at what scenarios open up there going forward. So one of the things that we see from the data and from the research that we do is that today there are, for countries that want to be competitive in key strategic technologies is essential. There are some technologies in particular that are becoming so foundational and multi-purpose that they will actually permeate most industrial sectors. And so not being competitive in those technologies becomes a little bit taxing on a country for the development of the country in the future. And so here we've actually chosen, together with Eva, 48 key strategic technologies, and we look at those to see whether the skeleton and the nervous system of the country, if you wish, composed by these strategic technologies, is in good shape, and what do we see in terms of emerging competitiveness, trends over time, potential networks of collaborations, and opportunities out there for investment. So this report that looks at these 48 key strategic technologies maps strengths, gaps, priorities for research and innovation investment, and again, you should see as a conversation starter. 3 main pillars of this report. As I give the floor now to Pierre-Alexandre, you will see most of the data, but the data that is presented in various ways. We actually, well, we will see, Pierre-Alexandre will say how many graphs we put together for this report. It's based on sources related to patents, related to scientific publications, and to investment in startups. That said, I will hand over to Pierre-Alexandre. He will say a little bit more about the data sources and so on, and then we'll dive into the results, right?
Thanks a lot, Andrea. And I want to say a huge thank you to Eva, to our colleagues, Sylvia, Joachim, Catherine, Michael. I don't know where's Michael, but
Michael is here.
Because it's been a wonderful collaboration. I think we really did a lot of very quality work together, but also for organizing these events, having you here, because sometimes, you know, you spend a summer, indeed, writing a report, stays into a drawer, it's really a pity. At the end, what this is really about is to generate a conversation that can also lead to actions, right? And who better than you all to take up this insight to actually create even a better framework for competitiveness and investment priorities in Sweden. Indeed, data, so that's what we focus on here. We tend and we try to be systematic, so we want to have something comparable. We don't want to compare apples and oranges. That also means that we focus on what we call the big 3. The big 3, and they have their limitation, and they're not everything, but they really capture a lot of the variation of innovation across countries, across regions, all over the world. So the nice thing is that very comparable. It's a bit like when you think about psychology traits, you know, you have the big 5, and they correlate with a lot of traits that matter. This is a bit the same with these 3. So we have patterns, and the more you dig into patterns, the more you see how much information there is. It's a very beautiful repository of human technological knowledge. It's very comprehensive. You have about 250,000 different technologies, and it allows you to basically see a lot of the technology regularities. Publication, of course, science matters as well, and gives you a lot of opportunities as well to think about the future, and a lot of the scientific capabilities translate into technology as well, or not, which is something we'll discuss in the report. And investments here are basically to complement something which is often in patents and publication, you might not see the very early startups, basically. So here what we look at is private investment into startups, not from like the very large R&D groups, because this is much less comparable, but this is something that we also add. And we have about almost 2,000 graphs. So think about this report as an atlas, right? That gives you, because of course 48 technologies across different regions, different countries, you have them at the end of the report. You have a nice set of QR codes that you can scan and basically dig into it. We'll have to be very selective here in this presentation. But
I thought we were showing them all.
Until tomorrow, 6 a.m., yes, indeed. But essentially, we have everything is interactive, so it's very easy to navigate and basically to give you some information. So basically, that would look like this. For instance, imagine that you have a standing in a specific technology. In this technology, 31% of the patent publication or investment comes from the US. And then the color gives you how strong this technology is compared to other technologies in a different country. And you have here, over here, the different technologies that we have: wind technology, batteries, smart grids, data analytics technology. So a set of technology that matters. And I would say one of the problems we're trying to solve with this type of analysis is to navigate the complexity of the technology space. So you have so many technologies out there, so many different technologies. Think about cybersecurity, AI, blockchain. You have so many out there. Very often when it comes to decide where to invest, whether it's like private money or public money, you might feel a little bit lost because there's just so much. And evaluate how we stand also compared to other countries is very difficult. So think about the Global Investment Index, for instance, or Innovation Index. Very nice because it gives you some kind of overall standing. But if you want to go deep into some specific technological field, you might not have the same level of information. But at the end, what matters is not that Sweden overall is innovative. Overall spends a lot in R&D. That might not matter that much. The question is Sweden investing in the technologies that are transformative and that will lead to prosperity? And that's a very different question. And you might have great scientific knowledge in life science, but not the foundation for AI, for instance, right? So like the distinction, the discrimination on which technology actually matters a lot. So the idea of this type of analysis is to give information, not to come and say like, all right, this is where you need to invest and get rid of this. That's not the way it works, right? It's more giving intelligence, information to make better decisions. And that's always the way we work with policymakers or business leaders. In the case of the Draghi report as well, the question was, the question that Draghi reported were two big questions that we tried to answer. One was, where does Europe stand in terms of what we call the complex technologies? So this very transformative technology. The answer is not great, by the way, because Europe lags behind in pretty much every technology that matters, in pretty much every technology that's going to redefine work and industry in the coming decade, okay? But it was nice to actually evaluate that. And the second answer that we also gave, and you will see also in this report, was about fragmentation. So trying to understand whether the research and innovation ecosystems in Europe were united, integrated, or were fragmented. And again, not a great answer, pretty fragmented. But overall, the type of information that we have in the report follow these lines. Now, there are like five, let's say it's a 5-course menu, right? So 5-course menu. The first one is basically to try to evaluate the current position of Sweden across these 48 technologies. And you will see that they vary a lot. There are some technologies where Sweden is really doing great compared to the rest of the world, and you might be like, oh yeah, I recognize that. Now, there are some technologies where you might feel like Sweden is doing great, however, in this big three, does not show up. And that's something that happens a lot. We've been running this analysis for many years, and essentially, the very nice thing is that we are very complementary. We have no understanding of Sweden. We have no understanding of the technologies of Sweden. We don't understand even the companies. Everything is new to us. So we're not deep at all. We don't have the context that everyone in this room has. However, we also don't have the bias. And with depth also comes a bit of myopia of what's happening on the other side of the world. The good thing is we treat Sweden and China and Japan and Korea and the US equal in that sense. We don't have additional knowledge as well. And it's very easy to compare basically how these different countries do. So this is like one of the summary graphs. It's very hard to make a summary graph out of hundreds of graphs in that case, because there is a lot of depth of information. But this summary graph has the advantage to, in one shot, in one graph, to show you essentially how Sweden is doing in terms of different technologies. So this here, this axis, the x-axis, is an index of technological capabilities based on patent data, okay? And it's normalized, it's comparable. I won't go into details, we won't geek about this, but I have, if you want to, if you have questions, we're happy to answer, obviously. But for now, you're gonna have to trust us somehow that it gives you an index of how well Sweden is doing compared to other countries, and this is in terms of technologies, okay? It's purely technological documents. And basically, if you're on this side, you know, from here to here, then this is where Sweden is doing very, very well in terms of technologies. Now, the y-axis here is in science. So you might be a leader in science, but this leadership in science might not translate into technological leadership, right? So you might create great AI technologies, right, from a scientific standpoint, and we've seen that Europe has been doing great. I mean, a lot of the neural net achievement actually come from Europe, but we haven't really developed the technology that applies these scientific discoveries to large industrial domains. So this is basically science. Like, I'm going way too far, fast. Jesus Christ, here. This is science, essentially. So you see, for instance, already, what this graph is telling you very quickly is that if you think about the Karolinska Institute or other great scientific fields, you see in scientific capabilities, Sweden is actually doing great in fields like synthetic biology, ATMP, life science, and you see medtech, personalized medicine. You see this kind of life science related fields, Sweden doing really, really good in scientific capabilities compared to the rest of the world, maybe not as much as you would expect in terms of technologies. Then you have this group here, so maybe that would be easier, yeah, here like the scientific leadership, you see also on semiconductor and chips, batteries, and photonics and spintronic, essentially. So you see this is where Sweden has a scientific leadership at the worldwide level. Now, what you see here is, in terms of technological leaderships, defense technology, blockchain, smart grids, cybersecurity, propulsion, sensor, where you see there is more of a tech leadership without necessarily having a scientific level of excellence comparable to other fields. And then there is like really like the golden nuggets where, you know, it's like the best of both worlds. And this is space. Actually, space technology is something that we see quite over in the report. It's one of the leader countries in Europe here. Software engineering and system development, autonomous vehicles. I'll have to go back to see what's behind this one. 5G, 6G, so mobile network, nuclear technologies as well, AR, VR, cloud computing and edge computing, robotics, IoT, biofuel here, and industrial automation. So these fields are where we're doing really, really well. In this case, maybe a little bit less than expected in terms of biotech, recycling technologies, data analytics. AI, unfortunately, is a field where, sure, you might say, hey, Lovable, right, Lovable, we have ex-employee from Spotify, but that's one, while you have at the worldwide level, a lot. And Lovable is what, 1.6 billion valuation is great, but also we're talking about a massive market, a massive amount of scientific engineering capabilities. So AI, for instance, was like a little bit less than what we would expect. Now, you also see colored spots. You see blue, sorry. That's not. Do you see blue? Green? Where is the blue? Yes, there is blue here. No, there is green and red, essentially. And green and red give you the intensity of private investment in startups. So basically in the economy of tomorrow. And you see here that really it's really nice alignment almost with pretty much every technology here in these top quadrants, where it's green, it's to the right, it's to the top, but this is where you see less investment basically that you would expect in these technologies here. So especially in defense here, we have much less investment that we would expect. All right, so this is like current position of Sweden across technologies. So instead of saying Sweden is doing great in innovation, right? I mean, because you see there are 48 here, but there are 48 selected technologies, right? So we could have 100, we could have 200, we could have 1,000, right? So it's already selected, and you see a lot of variation already. Then there is also an element where I'm not going to insist too much because, of course, I don't have too much time, but we basically look at competitiveness shift. And I invite you more to look at what's happening, if you're interested in the report, because we have it across the different dimensions. But basically, we're looking at what we call the previous period, which is like before 2020, so like 2016, 2020, compared to right now. And there are some, basically, if you had 1.4 and you say 1.4, basically you're not moving up or down. And you see that there are some technologies where we've seen like progress, so basically deviation, so 3.4 or we're at 3.2, for instance, and others in red. So it's very simple. In green, we're doing better than before. In red, we're doing worse than before. So to me, I'm going to highlight a few because you see, we could spend, a beautiful evening, but a long evening together. I'm going to highlight a few that I personally feel very strongly about, and I'm very worried about. The robotics here, I would say, to me, it's a collapse. When you go from 1.8%, of the world's innovation, you go to 1, that's a massive drop in a field that is absolutely strategic for Sweden, for Europe, for the world. Why? Because we need manufacturing capabilities. And I see in the room, quite a lot of you might have kids. And I want to ask you, raise your hand if you'll be happy for your kids to go to a factory floor. I see no, okay, I see one.
There are a few.
Two, okay. All right. Usually people say, absolutely no way. That's not the life we want to have for our kids, unless factories might be very nice in Sweden. That's my takeaway. Probably, I don't know.
They are.
And they are probably very nice in Sweden. However, the rest of the world is basically removing humans from the production lines at a massive capabilities. That's exactly what's happening in China, pretty much further than anywhere else, where you have massive, 400 times the size of a football field factories basically powered by robots. And we have the rise of general robots, so robots that can basically operate in a factory environment that was designed for humans. If you think about Figure, Optimus from Tesla, Unitree, you see this massive, massive, massive improvement, and that's going to redefine the reshoring and the remanufacturing of the coming decades. That's not good, and I'm super worried. I was looking at the figures also in France, in Italy, in Germany. This is dropping pretty much everywhere in Europe. That's very worrying. And it's a pity because Sweden had also maybe a comparative advantage here. I'm worried about that, somehow worried about nuclear, because if you think about a carbon-free emission type of technology that can be very flexible, works pretty much whenever we want, and that's going to also power, most likely, data centers. Behind AI is essentially converting energy into intelligence, right? So energy is key to power AI factories. That's absolutely essential, and nuclear is also very important. So IoT, also historically, Sweden doing great in IoT, might be also an issue. So basically, how do you have machines communicating with machines? So these are, let's say, the ones that we feel a bit worried about. And there are some also good news, whether it's like on the connectivity space, where essentially not only Sweden, of course, historically has been very, very good, but it's getting even stronger, which is also something that is worth putting into perspective. Same with like space technology. And then probably like AI, VR is something that is also interesting, AI, VR, and somehow drones. That's for patents. That is here when we look at essentially scientific publication. We see like also IoT doing not maybe great, but also I'm going to have to move forward. And investment, the readability of the graph is not great, and that's because basically it's investment world is very it's very 0-1. It's basically either you don't invest at all or you invest a lot. And you see here that these were the big investments of the previous period. So let's say nuclear energy technologies, autonomous vehicles, batteries. And batteries remain strong also in the current period. And somehow you start to see some field moving also forward. So robotics also going down, unfortunately. But like fintech and personalized medicines and drone is something we see consistently also as popping up. So that's for like the moving goalpost, let's say, and how things are going also in terms of in perspective. Then something really, really important, third dimension, is basically somehow where do you invest, okay? And when you say where you invest, for Sweden, for Europe, a big question is where you invest in terms of technology, right? I mean, now you see that there are different opportunities. Like, really, do you double down on drones? Do you accelerate robotics? Do you put more money into AI? It is not an easy question at all, right? Because you have many different technologies, and unless I'm wrong about the Swedish case, not much money as well. So limited resources, right? So you have to make choices. And one of the big, I would say, point and message in the Draghi report is that we have to make this tough choice. We cannot put a little bit of money here, a little bit here, a little bit here, just to please everybody. That doesn't work. However, if you push hard on one lever, then you can make a big difference. You can have a big impact. You can have excellent science, technology, environment that attract talent. You can make a difference if you focus your resources on a few of these technologies and sectors. However, then you also take a risk. You have to be careful not to choose the wrong one. You have to choose wisely. So that's in terms of like which technology, but also where in terms of the ecosystem, right? If I decide to grow tomato, I should pretty much go in the family backyard of Andrea rather than maybe here. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong again, but you know, who knows? So you have to find the right ecosystem for your investment as well. So here we look at how different regions in Sweden are doing in terms of different technologies as well. So essentially, this is, for instance, for Stockholm, but we have the different regions in Sweden, and we basically project these technologies, but at the geographical level. So basically, the graph will look very different, and the opportunities in Stockholm will look very different from the opportunities in Linköping, for instance, right? So the idea is like, it's very much aligned with, I don't know who is familiar with that, the smart specialization framework of the European Commission, maybe, okay, quite a few of you, which also has great intention, which is you should start from where you're kind of good at. You know? Don't reinvent the wheel, don't build a cathedral in the desert. So this is the same principle, and this principle is encapsulated by this variable here. Let's just call it feasibility, because again, I don't have time to go deep. Feasibility. We can measure how feasible a technology is, and how does that work? To give you an analogy, it's a bit like when you use Netflix, Amazon, people that buy this also buy this, people that watch this also watch this. We try to estimate how likely you are to actually perform in a technology, even though you might not be good at this technology right now. So you haven't watched Beauty and the Beast, but you watch related Disney movies, then you're gonna also have this kind of recommendation. So that's how we build this indicator. It's feasibility, and think about it in that way. If you speak Italian, it's easy to speak Spanish, much harder to speak Swedish. We could try later. But you see how that works. You see this similarity, this relatedness. So basically, we look at the technologies that are the most feasible for Stockholm, and then you get in this top space here, just go too far again, and too fast. You see here, for instance, cloud computing, software engineering, space technology, again, drones, cybersecurity, fintech, IoT. This is for Stockholm, not for Sweden. So where Sweden might not do necessarily great, for Stockholm it might still be the best investment for the region itself. And basically this variable here gives you like how feasible it is, right? So let's say I speak French, you know, that would be Italian and Spanish would be there, and Swedish would be somewhere there. Now there's another variable here, and another axis, which is like complexity. And complexity tells you, kind of reunite this tension between what the world really wants. So the world wants AI, right? 10% of the world, they like weekly use ChatGPT. So the world is desperate for AI. However, not very many companies and people can actually build the technologies that the world wants to consume. So it's like at the same time, how much do we desire technology and how much concentrated the resources are. And that's what we call complexity. And essentially, the complexity of a technology is a very good indicator of like future growth and progress. So let's say biofuel. Biofuel is a wonderful technology, but it's not a transformative technology. It's not technology that's going to generate hundreds of billions, you know, of market cap companies in the coming years. However, AI, robotics are, you know, green technologies are really technologies that are going to transform the world and have impact across pretty much every sector of the economy. So these complex transformative technologies here, they will be, yeah, let's say cloud computing, data analytics, computer vision, semicon, autonomous vehicles, space technologies, drones, and then kind of at the bottom, and again, nothing wrong to be at the bottom. This might be technologies very strategic for the country. There might be great reasons to go even there, but that would be like recycling, additive manufacturing, metal minerals, biofuels, wind, defense tech, marine technology, hydropower, nuclear, solar technologies, biobase, medtech will be these technologies here. That is what we call the moonshots. It's basically when the region doesn't have much, it's not really feasible. However, it's highly transformative. So you might want to give it a shot. However, you don't want to do too many moonshots, right? Because then you're just betting a bit and taking a crapshoot. Here, incremental investment is like, it's a bit when you are on your football field, instead of moving forward, you're moving laterally. Can be done, but not really moving the needle that much. And of course, the top quadrant here is like when you have great capabilities here into fields that are very transformative. And that is, for instance, AI, OT, cloud, cybersecurity for Stockholm. You see, don't ask me to try to pronounce this region, but I'm sure you guys know it very well. You see, have a very different set of capabilities. It's basically shifting a lot the type of capabilities and opportunities as well. Again, the opportunities being at the top here, okay? And then the moonshot here, you see they are a little bit different here. And if I'm not wrong, that's South Sweden. That's where Lund is. And actually, I worked in Lund for 2 years, almost 10 years ago. So I know the region a little bit. And then you see what's interesting, for instance, just for you to focus, because 48 technologies across so many graphs, you mean like, what am I looking at? But you see how here we're focusing much more, compared to Stockholm, for instance, we're moving much more with this type of technologies, like the red technologies around synthetic biology, personalized medicine, life science, medtech. We're moving a bit more in that space here. All right. I won't go into detail. I'm going to shut up now in 2 minutes, but just to give you an idea of what else you might find, because that can be also interesting. We also look at the organizational level. So we map also the companies, the organization, the institutions that are behind these technologies, which might be very useful also for some strategic decision. And I'm just going to show you, but not go too much into detail. But this is, for instance, for quantum. I know for scientific publication in quantum, you get KTH, KTH, Stockholm University, Uppsala, Lund University here. And basically, we can assess as well, we don't go too much into detail here, but we can also assess how these organizations are doing compared to their peers at the global level, which is also very interesting. I mean, we can always refer to the Shanghai index, but Shanghai index is like super broad. Here you can also do it per field, and you can identify maybe the organization that might have more capabilities in a specific field, and we do that for the 48 technologies across investment, publication, and patents. And you see here, for instance, in terms of semicon and chips, if you wonder who are the leaders, you know, who are actually the players, the key players in Sweden when it comes to semicon and chips technologies. In patented technology, you see Ericsson, which is very much there, and a lot of companies that fairly I've never heard about. Well, there are a few I know, but like most of them I've never heard about. But they basically show up also in this map in related capabilities to semicon and chips. The last one, I would say last but not least, but I'm not going to go too much into detail as well. It's just like, it's a menu. You know, these are the options of your report. You want more, you're still hungry, you go at the end, and you'll see pretty much all the information here. But we map the connection as well between the different regions, and also we evaluate the complementarity potential of Swedish regions with other EU regions, and we look at whether they're connected or not, okay? And to what extent. So we look at, for instance, these are RNA collaboration of is it this region? No, where is the region? Where am I? Where is this region?
West. Western Sweden.
Okay, that's the one. Oh, I thought that was this one. And you look at basically where the collaboration in quantum, so with this other region, but also some Italian and French region. And this is in scientific publication. These are patents as scientific publication, and you see basically where you actually track the collaboration with other scientists, other inventors. But we also estimate somehow whether you see more collaboration that you expect or less than you expect. Again, won't go into details, but these are the top 20 hubs in quantum in terms of scientific publication in Europe. They're not ranked by Madrid is not above London. Okay, it's not that. It's like this region is collaborating twice as much as you will expect with Madrid. So they are ranked by the intensity of collaboration of the Swedish regions with other hubs. And basically we map these opportunities as well, where there are more collaboration opportunities and where there are maybe also untapped opportunities, which, for instance, frankly, without going too much into detail again, but just to highlight a little bit, we were expecting much more of Munich, Lyon, and South Holland, like these three regions here, would be like natural candidates for the region, and we see a bit less collaboration. All right, and I leave it to Andrea to make sense of all of that.
All right, so thanks, Pierre-Alex. I'm going to go very fast because I think we're running out of time. But as you see there, you realize that Sweden is punching above its weight in several of these 48 key strategic technologies. There are some of them that you've seen where Sweden is a global leader, so both on the technological and the scientific side. There's also opportunities, and there's cases in which we see the country struggling a bit to convert a very significant scientific leadership into the technological leadership, and thereby reaching global leadership, sort of the top right part of our competitiveness graphs. And so there's something in there that could be improved in terms of how you translate science into patents based on the indicators that we have there, and also in terms of how the broader innovation ecosystem carries innovation in what now in Brussels is called the investment journey, right? We use that in the budget in the next multi-annual financial framework. But it's very important that you, once, for me, my role is just to try and provoke Pierre-Alex, because for me, for him, he said, we try to look at everything as everything we're alike, and I have to try making the differences, right? Or trying to build a story on this. For example, the fact that Sweden is doing fairly well in AI, but could improve, but also it's losing competitiveness in robotics and the Internet of Things, is very problematic, because the next frontier of artificial intelligence is what we call physical AI, and the deepening of the digital infrastructure into connected objects is something that we will see over the coming years. So you can try to catch up on, for example, generative AI, but a lot of the industrial applications that we will see are not necessarily Gen AI, but they will go in this direction of embedding AI. And the more the technological frontier will allow it into smaller and smaller objects. And so we will need to take decisions in more decentralized way, in what we call edge cloud IoT infrastructures. If we don't do this sort of horizon scanning of what technologies are coming, we lose part of the picture, right? And where we might want to be potentially competitive, so that the whole combination of technologies that we need is there, so that we can go to the next level of complexity. And is indeed what complexity theory tells us. Typical example is the letters of the alphabet. Depending on how many letters of the alphabet you actually have in your location, you can compose many different words in the future. So that's your next capability. And so if you have AI, Internet of Things, sensors, and maybe augmented reality and virtual reality, all these components together, you are well equipped to really go into the next frontier of artificial intelligence. And so this is the type of analysis that you can build on top of the data, right? So this is why we say it could be stronger progress in some of these transformative technologies, and they can also be analyzed as clusters. So robotics and smart grids, you see areas where we have said strategic divestment, but it could also be areas of attention where you actually might want to double down the investment. Robotics is certainly one of them, as Pierre-Alexandre was explaining. As I said before, scientific leadership not always converted in technological leadership. These are some of the areas where we see this problem and this potential problem. We see innovation highly concentrated. Should I give it a try? In Stockholm? Stockholm, okay, I said it, okay. Västra Götaland, yeah? How's it? And Skåne, Was it good? 6 out of 10? Okay. So it's normal that it's concentrated, especially for the most complex technologies. And as Pierre-Alexandre was saying, we have the same problem at the pan-European level. And so I was discussing with Sylvia, we are looking at where AI factories are being put, and they are rightly being put in Sweden, but do we need an AI factory in some other parts of Europe that I'm not naming, where there's no ecosystem, just because we try to please everyone? Or should we look at what each region in Europe can potentially do in terms of next step, and this is what economic complexity teaches, and try to incentivize these regions to get there? So that's a little bit what is changing in Brussels in terms of smart specialization, but it's not just that regions develop according to their frontier, but we are doing something even more complicated, and I'm going to get back to this in the last slide, which is trying to ensure that this development at the regional level is functional to a pan-European development, which is not something that has happened until now in cohesion policy. So research and innovation policy needs to be adapted to capabilities. And Sweden has strong scientific collaboration networks, but it was possible for us to observe some areas where our recommender system says that, for example, Catherine has watched all the Disney movies, but it's strange because she never watched Beauty and the Beast, which is something that disappointed us, for example. So our recommender system can't explain why this hasn't happened yet, or this is not happening as much as the system would predict. And again, conversation starters. So strategic recommendations, try and launch targeted investment programs for priority key strategic technologies, focusing on where this is most strategic. Pursue high complementary collaborations, and this requires potentially that this research is scaled up in other countries and at the pan-European level, encouraging the regional specialization, selectively also looking for some moonshot projects. By looking deeper into the region, you will realize where the capabilities are, much more than, even more than the data suggest. And maintain this system of situational awareness, as we call it, so that the analytical capabilities is something that you can monitor over time and gives you also an idea of what works and what doesn't, right? And if you keep this analysis ongoing, again, ideally scaling it up beyond Sweden to track networks of collaboration. Last slide promised. What now? What now? There's a panel, so we know that on the agenda. But there are some things that the data cannot necessarily fully explain, right? Fast-changing geopolitical environment may create new priorities and opportunities. So it's not that the data replace the decision maker, the policy maker, the analyst, and the expert, and the practitioners. You see those things coming, and sometimes data are very path-dependent by definition, right? The disruptions are more difficult to anticipate. For example, the emphasis on defense, it's shifting even more the importance of foundational and dual-use technologies, AI, quantum IoT, synthetic biology. You saw that Sweden is very well positioned there. These are optimal investments for many regions in Sweden. And you also have to ask the European Union to focus on those areas, because it's better to invest in Sweden in those areas than invest a little bit everywhere, as Pierre-Alex was saying. And a lot of the potential depends on future policy decisions. So Sylvia has done and does it quite a lot. And coming to Brussels and discussing with the European Commission, we do this quite a lot. It's very important that the future decisions on the budget, on regional policy, on research and innovation policy, on Horizon Europe, and I can make many examples of this, but I'm not going to do this unless there are questions, of course. These will bring new opportunities or potentially constraints. And this is where I want to land. This country is worth so much to the European Union that it has to be much more present in Brussels, because you are trailblazers, but you also need to interact with the European Commission and the European Union to also show why certain investments with certain priorities should be set in a way that also helps Sweden make the most of its outstanding potential. So I'm going to stop there. Pierre-Alexandre and I will stop there. We're very thankful for the opportunity to have given you this presentation. And again, thank you to Eva, Mikael, Catherine, Sylvia, Joachim, and everybody.
And thanks, guys, for giving this very impressive run-through of the report. They managed to compromise 846 slides into 40 minutes, so that's great. You will be here. You can answer questions afterwards, but now we will move into the panel discussion. We will start with a panel where we will have a business perspective. And to help me with that discussion, I would like to invite Malin Frenning, CEO of RISE, and also EVA Fellow, to the stage, and also David Sonek, CEO of Navigare Venture, which is an early-stage investor specialized in science-driven companies, and Pia Sandvik, CEO of Teknikföretagen, the Association for Technology Industries of Sweden, also an EVA Fellow, spending a lot of time here at EVA, which we're very grateful for. Having listened into the presentation, and also you have been able to look at the report in advance, I would just like to start with an open question. What are your take-home messages after having listened and read the report? I start with you, Pia.
I think it's important to state that Sweden has a very remarkable, I would say, strong footprint in several key technology areas. And I think you show that as well in your report. But these areas are interconnected as well. And different industries and sectors are interdependent, and it's also very important that we look at this more in a system perspective than we do today. And we have to also consider the value chains, the industrial value chains, when we design and implement research policy. I will come back to that later as well, because that's my sort of key messages today. So, and secondly, we have a strong position, but it's no guarantee for future leadership. And I think we are actually there now, where we need to show much more of technology leadership, and we have to do it together. We have to have clearer priorities, we have to have targeted investments, and we need a deeper European collaboration. And I would say that strategic innovation programs is the key for that. You're not surprised when I say that we need to have more research in Sweden that is focused on the industrial needs, because that's what creates competitiveness for the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Pia. And Malin, from your perspective.
Yeah, first of all, I would start also where Pia started. I don't think that you can start anywhere else. We have a good position, and a very favorable position here in Sweden. And we are one of the most innovative countries in the world, which is a good starting point, I would say. But we heard today also that this is a fragmented technology map, and I will bring that home and think about. And in combination that we also have among the highest R&D investments in the world, remember also that most of that is coming from the industry, which is good. But I think that combination with my second thing that I will bring home is that we can't rest on the past achievements, which also Pia mentioned. So, and I think there we need both powerful and smart innovation policy. I think that's key. And when I say powerful, I mean that it will require a lot of resources, such as capital and competence. And when I say smart, I mean that it will need us to be more selective. And we heard about the 48 today, and we need to decide and steer also our resources into much more focus on this technology map. So that's the two things I will bring home.
Thank you, Malin. And David, you're right in the middle of this.
Right in the middle of this. Yes, and I feel so tired and so disappointed with one thing, is that all my life, most of my life, I've heard about this inefficient translation between research and then patenting and then investments. And we have been bad at this for 40 years. And how come we haven't fixed it yet? And I think one of those things is that we have, in the universities, and we have a strong university sector, we have a fairly weak institutional sector, we have severely underfinanced innovation offices and companies at universities that can invest in that translation. So that we do not focus enough on that. That's one major thing. And we need to put much more of energy and money into patenting at universities, and then the translation into companies, because that's what we try to invest in. But that is not an academic priority, and it needs to become one. And with that is the second thing then, we need to prioritize, as you say. We need to have the intelligence to prioritize. And now for, again, 40 years, we have had a very strong tradition that competition drives knowledge. Competition drives efficiency. It doesn't create knowledge. So we need to reestablish some of the institutions that help us prioritize and help us to understand what is the next big thing. And my third point is that it's not necessarily, and now I'm trying to instir some sort of energy into the debate, it's not necessarily so that established industry has the full understanding of what the future brings, because we have very strong institutions that drive a certain direction, the inertia of industry, because you are paid by customers that pay for applied research. You organize the big customers. EVA consists of CTOs from big industry, and Vinnova asks big industry what's next, what should be our priorities. So we have a very strong institutional system for going along the historical path. We might need to see what institutions could help us to understand what the disruptive future is.
That's why we always include you, David, to really push us to think a bit wider than we usually do. But I would like to pick up on the second point that you made, this problem with the translation, and perhaps direct to Pia, because the report really highlights, this was one of the conclusions, this gap between the scientific potential and the technological outcome. So how come, why are we not maximizing the returns of the investment that we do in R&D? Do you agree with this? Do you have any ideas where we should, you were indicating some in your introductory remarks.
Yeah, but I think it's, we do a lot of investments, and we can also see it's not just about strategic technologies. We also know that productivity is going down in Sweden. So we don't get the output of the investments that we are doing, and it's decreasing the productivity for quite a long time now. And we can see that other countries are moving much faster. I agree with you, David, when you say it's not only established industries, but we have a strong tech industry in Sweden as well. So I think it's about creating incentives for the universities to collaborate with industry, not just established as being around, but they know a lot there as well, I have to say. But also together with the new tech companies, and create programs where these can together elaborate about what needs to be done and where the future competitiveness will be created and new industries will grow up. And I think we lack that. We don't have it, and we have actually been putting less money into that. The industry investing more in research, where is the state? They are still not at 1% of GDP for research. So, I mean, that's one of the problems, because we have to do this together. And I think I'm very proud of Sweden. I mean, we really have a Swedish model. And we have been successful, and we still are in a European context. But it's not about Europe. It's the rest of the world that is running fast. And we are lacking behind. So I think we have to create a strong community in Europe. But if we stay in Europe and think that the competitiveness is in Europe, wow, we have a huge problem.
That's so, Malin, picking up after this really fiery remark.
Yeah, exactly. No,
so where you're the bridge between academia and the company. So how will we fix it?
And that's what we do at RISE all the time, being the bridge. So, of course, we listen and have a dialogue to the clients. But I think creating competitiveness for Sweden is also that you need to be a little bit ahead sometimes. So we're not always listening. We are having a dialogue, just as a comment. But bridging the gap, just a comment. I think we have done a lot of different initiatives regarding analysis of the strategic initiatives. And I think this, what we saw today, was quite in line, but it was more detailed. And I think this is a great job being done by EVA, and we need that. And I think what I've seen before is that the broad blush conclusions are similar, and that is not a criticism. I think the opposite, because I think it means that we have a lot of substance in different analysis, but now we need to ensure that we are taking it further. And I think that two factors are key now to raise the innovative power of Sweden. And first of all, I'm an applied research institute, so we believe that one of the things is to ensure access to world-class technology infrastructure for the whole ecosystem. And that means that we need to ensure that the innovators of the system can do the trials and test and innovate with speed, because the speed, I think, is crucial now with everything around us. And if I can pinpoint anything in the report, I think the word speed, there are a few when I read it very quickly during the weekend. But I think the increased speed will lower the risk also of innovation. And the second is, of course, the simulative development and uptake of these enabling generalized technologies, of course, such as AI. And I think you mentioned also AI before, and AI is crucial for us. So that is a certain specific area that we need to push a little bit more.
And also you mentioned this opportunity with the report to go deeper into specific technology. And David, there is a mentioning on that we are lacking we don't see the technological development in these foundational technologies. Do you agree with that? And do you have any ideas how we can increase the incentives of picking up speed in using the foundational technologies?
Foundational technologies take analysis to understand which are the foundational technologies, and it also takes a lot of courage, because these are not solutions, these are foundations. So I think, to agree with Pia, where is the state? And sometimes where are the large corporations? Because if we want to make a move, we cannot procure solutions. We are good at procuring solutions. We have a specification, and the solution should adhere to that specification, which means that procurement will be won by someone that has a very old, stable solution. We need to procure much more. We need to buy all those steps that lead to, so that if we want to move a technology out of the university and into mainstream, we need to pay for those steps by buying a demonstrator, buying a prototype, buying something that is not the full solution. And it takes also boldness and optimism that we can do it. And I think that Europe, I mean, Sweden, we made our own computers in 1948 and forward. France, you built this Concorde that now the US has appropriated as a part of their tech story, by the way. But anyhow, we built all these gadgets because we had the optimism and the courage to take the first steps. Now we rely on long requirement list, and we take the safe route. And if we want to bring technology from universities to competitiveness, and that translation takes a lot of analysis and a lot of boldness. Do we have that?
Now we're talking new Concords and new Minitels and other...
Big and fast.
Perhaps a bad example. Thanks. Pia, we also saw in the report, but also one slide here, that when we make these deep dives into certain technologies, AI, space, quantum, we see a very strong dependence on individual companies. There is one based in Kista that is coming up on a lot of slides.
Yes.
If we move into other areas, there are others that are really flashing red. This is, of course, a strength, and perhaps not that surprising, given that Sweden is a small country. But is it a problem? What can we do to broaden the base for these the R&D intensive companies?
I don't see it as a problem. I think the problem is if we see it as a problem.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we should be happy that we have these research-intensive companies in Sweden, and that they still decide to have their R&D in Sweden. Because if they didn't, wow, we are talking about 10 companies or something like that. So it's not a problem. It's actually a gift. But having said that, I have to say something more about these large companies. They are global. They know. They feel this competitiveness under their skin, because they're on those markets. So I think that's also important. But it's still something about the whole ecosystem. And David talks about that. How should we actually be able to get the new knowledge that is created in universities? How can we actually get these global companies that are out there? They are competitive. They know what needs to be done. And it's also about, of course, it's about investing in critical technologies and these really new techniques that are coming, but also get the whole tech sector into the new companies that are coming up. And we haven't found the clue to that yet, I would say. But I've just recently, I think I've realized something. I still don't know, but I have at least, I think I have seen something over there. it's not just about technologies. It's about way of working. It's like David says, we have to be so secure. We don't do trial and error. That's why we don't have speed, because we know to have everything before we start to do it. And I think that's different if we compare to China, for example. They just do. And they put all the stakeholders around the table, and they start to do it. And then say, okay, this is the best we know now. We'll go for that. And then they find something else. Okay, we go for that instead. I mean, they are so fast. Look at their development of EV vehicles. I mean, it's, yeah. So I think, I didn't know if I'd answer your question, actually.
No, but I think I definitely think you did.
Yeah.
Great reflection on
we need those companies in Sweden.
Yeah, they bring the world to us.
What would we be without them?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. With that, I think I'm very sorry, but that has to be the final word from this panel. Thank you very much for sharing your insights. A big round of applause to Pia, David, and Malin. We would also, now we heard the perspective from the business side. Now we will take the perspective of scientific production, but also keeping, of course, competitiveness and innovation in focus, and provide the perspective from the scientific side. We are delighted to welcome up on stage Darja Isaksson, Director General of Vinnova, Sweden's innovation agency, Katarina Bjelke, Director General of the Swedish Research Council, and Jan-Ingvar Jönsson, Vice Chancellor, Linköping University. Give them a round of applause. I would also like to start this discussion with an open question. What were your take-home messages when reading the report? Jan-Ingvar?
Yes, I'm not that surprised about the report, so I have a couple of reflections. First of all, I should say that it's very good that you have a data-driven analysis like this, because it's based on real figures. That I really appreciate, because you have the investments, the scientific production, and the patents, which is really, really good instrument to have. I'm not surprised, though, because, you know, we are ranked top 1 among the EU members when it comes to innovation. The problem I see you have in the report to some extent. So one problem I see, which is kind of lifted a bit, is that we are really good as an innovative country. We are really good at startups, but then we lose it at countries. It's really the transfer from startup to scale-ups that is a problem. Two things that I think is important is where I share your sort of the view that you put forward. That is that we are lagging behind in several technology areas. But one key for this, I think, which is one of the 48, which I really think is the support for the other 47, and that's AI. Because AI kind of, we can't have technology-driven without being a strong AI country. So that's absolutely clear. Actually, this morning, I printed out the innovation scoreboard. You have seen it, I guess. And that is, to some extent, you actually, if you compare different areas, you actually can see where we are lagging behind. And some of the really scary areas is direct government support, which you touched upon. Mm-hmm. Where is the government when it's come to funding all these technology-driven? We should be so happy that we have the Wallenberg Foundation in this country. Otherwise, The second one that I'm not surprised, but it sticks out, that job-to-job mobility, human resource and research technology. We are really lousy on mobility in this country. We need to find the incentives for having academic personnel moving in and out from public sector to private sector, things like that. So that was very good that I was brought to attention.
Thank you. So now we're moving over to the funders,
yes.
The government side.
Bye-bye.
So, Katarina, what were your take-home messages?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's an amazing, interesting report, I must say, with all these 48 areas, and you really have to do a lot of analysis to really grasp what's in it. But let me first say, as a few other mentioned, also Sweden is strong in many areas. And even if this strong, we have been strong. I mean, nowadays the competition is fierce, I would say, and the speed is really fast, and we are losing out actually in several areas because of the strong competition. But Sweden invests, as you also see in here, more than other countries. Even if there could be more money from the government, I agree, but we have a large investment from industry. But the question is, do we get enough out of what we invest? And that is also what you find in the report. So I think that the report identifies, several areas needing special improvement in Sweden, like, for example, personalized medicine, AI, robotics, and so on. And those are actually aligned with the national strategies of today. The question is it enough? I don't know. But I would say that the recommendation clearly shows that the responsibility must be taken by various actors within the Swedish system, and it cannot be solved only by one part or an isolated invention. It doesn't solve it. Engagement in the EU is extremely important, and we try to talk about this all the time. We have to engage there more, but also on the global level, I would say. Considering the geopolitical situation today, I think a lot of actors actually are afraid of international collaboration today. But the study also shows something else, and that is that the support to key research infrastructures is essential, and it is an enabler actually to achieve what we want to achieve, because the research infrastructures, they collect people from all sectors, and that could be something really important for Sweden to work further on, actually. So that's my reflection so far.
Okay, last but not least, Diane.
Yeah, a lot has been said. Thank you. I've been looking forward for this day for a while, so it's really great to be here and to have read the report. It's always nice to get confirmation that we have areas of strength. So great. Connectivity, autonomous vehicles, autonomous systems in general, drones, etc. I think the key point is this, and we come back to it again and again. We have a number of important transformational technology areas where we could, should, must do better at translating it into actual competitiveness. And then I second what you said. Many of us need to act differently. So we should, after this, and not only talk, but, what are the hows? What are the differences? How will we get the mobility, get the strategic infrastructures, get the radical innovation happening? So let's dig into the hows, because I think we agree a lot about that.
Yeah.
And
yeah, thanks for opening up the discussion. But as Silvia mentioned in the beginning, Daria and Katarina, you've been tasked by the government to run these programs on Excellent Cluster for Breakthrough Technologies. How do you see this work contributing to solving the issues that you have that been presented today? Are there any insights on how we will act differently? The calls are out now. Any reflections on the work that is ahead of you based on the report?
Shall I start? Yeah. I think that the assignment by the government is really smart in this case, because there has been and is a gap, so to say, in the funding mechanism between the Swedish Research Council and Vinnova, and we need to tighten that gap. So this assignment is a really good chance, I would say, for us to work even closer than we have done so far. So in that sense, I think it's really good. It's what the system needs, but we can do what we can do. Then we need other actors to come in after what Vinnova can do. And yes, we have different assignments. We have a bottom-up approach in order to see what kind of new technologies or new ways we can work with technologies, and that is different from the assignment of Vinnova. But I think this is really possibility of making, if everyone act in the same way, market change actually. So it's a good opportunity.
Yeah, no, I think, and I think that the point, and we have some people in the room here who I think can give us feedback on this, but that this assignment is an opportunity. I mean, the investments are fairly sustainable. There's a clear scale-up timeline. I think that working together right now, shared analysis on where the opportunities are, on what the bottlenecks are, on what kind of changes in incentives and opportunities would actually make a difference. I mean, in the same environments, I think working together right now is really important. I also believe, coming back to what David Sonnek said, that there is room for. I noticed in the report that you were talking about moonshot initiatives, actually new ways of working to really drive this kind of speed that we're talking about. And there are some really relevant international examples. So I also think that it's very valuable to Sweden for us all. I mean, universities can do, looking at you now, maybe together we can set the incentives so that recruitment, mobility, a lot of these things, strategic investments in infrastructure can be done, you know, in a more effective way. But I also think in terms of mechanisms, really, that we have reason to look at what kind of moonshot mechanisms will help drive radical innovations, especially on the areas where we see that we have the scientific leadership, but we're not quite there. So creativity and boldness in this type of approach, I think, could be very beneficial.
Yeah. I can just add that the first round showed that the most common word in the first round was AI. So a lot of application in AI, which is good.
Yeah. Sounds promising going forward. So keeping in the realm of AI, then, Jan-Ingvar, an initiative at Linköping University is actually singled out in the report, the MIMO initiative, as a central node for the AI development of Sweden. Could you just say a few words about that? And do you see that as a model for other initiatives, perhaps in other foundational technologies?
Absolutely. Let me start with your final question. Absolutely. This is national collaboration, national alignment, and we need that for many of these technology areas. Absolutely. AI sticks out because it's a huge investment. So if I should just say it in 30 seconds, the investment where Linköping University leading basically all four of them is first the national academic infrastructure of AI and supercomputers. It's the Berzelius donation from the Wallenberg that supports the program in autonomous systems, AI, and machine learning. The third one is the European HPC that we applied for, and all the nodes within the EuroHPC were invited to apply for an AI factory. So that's how we got the Mimer. Mimer, by the way, is a huge dragon who actually guards the well of wisdom. Isn't that a good name? So anyway, we're talking about investments during a 5-year period of more than 2,000 million Swedish crowns. It's a lot. So, but the key message is really we can't fragment this. We need to find a national sort of agreement, coordination, alignment, and the universities together with the industry needs to collaborate. So MIMO is more or less to work for academia to work together with small and medium enterprise companies. The big companies have their own muscles, so they are building their own AI factory. But now this is actually for helping the small and medium enterprises that don't really have the muscles, the knowledge, the skills, the personnel to do it. So that's why we hire all over Sweden technical personnel, experts, and we do that in collaboration with RISE. So that's Mimer.
So everybody listen, there you have the blueprint. If you didn't catch it, you call Jan-Ingvar, and then you know how to build the
But I should say one thing. I think all big universities need their own AI investments. This cannot take care of everything. So,
back to the agencies present on the stage. You are both continuously monitoring the scientific and technological development of Swedish research and innovation in your agency. So, based on that, looking at the report, were there anything that stood out? Anything that you were surprised by, or it's something that you think were missing in the report?
There are things where you go like, I want to know more about that. Some of the state on advanced materials, bio-based materials, etc. So things to dig into. I was kind of happy about this also clear statement that we need to be more strategic in terms of foundational technologies, where given our relative strengths varies, our opportunities varies, etc. I don't think that we can have a one-size-fits-all approach to them, but I think that the report did a really good job in just, we have to actually make these kind of strategic decisions. So I think it's pushing us in a good way. Was I surprised by anything? No, of course, this kind of material makes you want to, dig even deeper into certain things. So not necessarily surprised. But the moonshot initiatives as well. So it's like, okay, synthetic biology, for instance. So there are these opportunities that are quite clearly spelled out. Like, how do we get it right this time so that we don't stand here 40 years later saying we wish we would have been better at commercialization? Come on, there are these opportunities where there are really important shifts happening where we have an obligation and opportunity to get it right.
Thanks. And Katarina?
Yeah, I was not surprised, but I'm a little bit sad maybe that we have a lot of good collaboration in Europe and worldwide in academia, but then something happens. We don't get to the next step, so to say. And if this is because of the universities is not good enough to take patents and to work on commercialization, or if there is something else, because the strange thing is that I think we have a very good position where we work a lot with academia and industry. I mean, we have a lot of those collaboration, and we are very good at that. And still, you see that something that's the lack. It was not surprising, but still a little bit sad to see that we still are in that place. I was also a little bit surprised about the focus on regions in Sweden. I mean, that is very helpful to see, but Sweden is an extremely small country. So, I mean, for us, just knowing the regions, for us, it's more about, I think, where in Europe, where in the world can we collaborate with the best, and where do we have opportunities, and so, but still interesting.
Well, thanks. Jan-Ingvar, you're not only the guardian of the well of knowledge, was that the... Wisdom. You're also, you have a background in life science, and life science comes up in a lot of the slides where there are great opportunities. Any reflections on that, and how do you see it from your perspective, being involved in the sector for so long?
I'm going to be very clear. Are we a leading life science country at the moment? No, I don't think so, to be honest. We are lagging behind. We lost the pharmaceutical industries for 20 years ago, and we're still lagging behind. We are really good at excellent research, but we are not that good at transfer it into the benefit of patients, into healthcare providers, into commercial products. MedTech is a typical example of that, where you in the report say that we have strong scientific leaders, but we lag behind when it comes to the technical development. The same with personalized medicine, to be honest. It is. Healthcare medicine is global. But if you want high quality in your hospitals, in university hospitals, you need to have the capacity to be the ones that introduce the new medicine, drugs, early diagnostic, and so on. We have the potential, but as you said, I've been at many conferences for the last 10 years, and I still have the feeling that we're still talking about the same thing. So I'm a bit worried when it comes to that.
Thank you very much for that reflection.
Can I second that also? Because that's also where I would like to come back to some of the things that Pia Sandvik said in terms of the systems perspective.
Exactly.
I mean, there are known bottlenecks here as well in terms of data sharing, governance, and other things that are essential.
Great, but we have things to do. So, but thank you very much for those reflections. Big round of applause to Daria, Katarina, and Jan-Ingvar. And now I would like to invite Sylvia back to stage to wrap up this Very interesting seminar. A lot of things to process. And you're going to do it live on stage now. So what are your thoughts on the discussion? Any interventions that you would like to comment or reflect upon?
First, a real quick one on the regional perspective. We actually asked Pierre-Alex and Andrea to put that in there because we think it's extremely helpful, because you're totally right, Katarina. We are a small country, but even in the small country, we tend to duplicate. So I think it's good to get that picture. We really wanted that. I want to say, I think this has been, I'm not objective, but I think this has been fantastic. It's been an atlas, as you said, Pierre-Alex, a magnifying glass, an eye-opener in some extent, a regional perspective, which I think is very valuable, but also some blinking lights. And it's provided us with the granularity and precision. And I also liked what you said. Personally, I'm somebody who's been quite frustrated with the European Innovation Scoreboard, if I should be totally honest, for many years, because I feel like it is not an actionable tool enough. Do you see what I mean? And I think this is hoping to take us a step further. But as we all said, I think this is just the beginning. There's so much collective intelligence in this room. And as you have been very clear and humble about, you can give us this helicopter perspective and also look very deep at the data. But now we need to provide it with even more context. And that's our job, right? So this is the starting point. It's a conversation piece. And I also really liked what basically most of the panelists said. But to me, it sounds like, look forward with confidence, be bold, but also be quick. And that is the challenge. And I think Mario Draghi said it in his report. And this is also something I would like to say. The thing that frustrates me, and I was a part of the, I was the lead author for the proposals for what the next framework program should look like, the HITER report. And the thing that frustrates me personally is that it's been a year since Draghi. I would love to see more member states do this exercise that we've done today so that we can finally get to work. I don't see enough happening. Ironically or not ironically, I think that the European Commission is they're getting the message. They have their own struggles, but they're getting the message and they're trying to do something. But we need to do a lot more at member state level. And that's something that really worries me. So I think we're running out of time. Should I just say, or do you have another question to me?
No, you keep going, Sylvia.
No?
Very interesting.
No, but so I hope others will join us in this exercise. I'm looking sort of to you because this is what the work we have cut out for us. I think it's actually pretty existential, what we need to achieve. And I also think taking this work forward, I've been talking about this book forever, but I really think this book, and we also need to look a lot at technology adoption. Part of what you're showing is technology adoption, but I think we need to understand better, and that's been touched upon by others, by Pia, by David. How do we increase our uptake of technology? That's something that we're also not great at. I think there's something there, even if Sweden is perhaps better than other countries. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming. I want to say a huge thanks to Pierre-Alex and Andrea, because it's exceeded my expectations, and it's given us something to work with, and now it's, the ball is in our court. But we hope to welcome you back again soon. This is something, as you said, we have to monitor very closely. I also want to thank the panelists. I think you provided excellent perspectives. And thank you all for coming. And it's just the beginning.
And a final thanks to Per Andersson and Eva Lagerblad, who's helped us here at IVA to set this seminar up.
And to you for moderating. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.